Hi everyone, Steve Calis here. Before the episode begins, I would just like to say a huge thank you to Jessica for agreeing to be on the show. We're a fairly new show and Calis Media is a new company, and it means the world to us that she would trust us with her story. You'll hear in this episode that we were both really nervous, and understandably I think. The dynamic became that I would describe parts of the book and Jess felt more confident and comfortable responding to what I was saying and was fine with me leading the way through the story and asking her hundreds of questions about the experience. And in the end we've made an episode that I'm really proud of. Please find Jessica on Facebook at The Girl in the Pink Shoes and buy her book of the same name on Amazon. It's disturbing, but it's real life and it's something we as a society need to be more aware of. It's never nice to be aware of or to read about child abuse, especially maybe one of the worst child abuse cases I've ever heard and read about. But it is happening and we do need to do something about it. And Jess is the perfect leader for that. So we hope you enjoy the episode. Let us know on Calis Media, Calis Media on Facebook, or The Girl in the Pink Shoes on Facebook. And get in touch. Let us know what you think. Thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome to the Steve Calis Show, and today we've got a very special episode and a very special guest. I'm joined by Jessica Harrington. Jess, how you doing?
Hi Steve, thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, it's my honour because I've just finished reading your book and I'm desperate to know what happens in the sequel, in the third one. I want to know the sequel immediately, but we're here to talk about this book, the one you've just released. If you don't mind, we'll crack straight on with the questions.
Yeah.
So Jess, how are you feeling? Are you feeling a little bit nervous? Because I'm feeling nervous.
I'm feeling a little bit nervous.
Yeah,
yes.
well, please, please don't worry. I mean, like I said, I'm feeling nervous too. This is the first really serious topic that the Steve Calis Show's had to discuss and talk about. But I think between us, if we're comfortable, we can do your story some justice.
Yeah.
So why don't we start right at the beginning of your book, The Girl in the Pink Shoes. Brilliant book. Go out and buy it and review it immediately. So when the book starts, you are 9 years old.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, because I'm a fan of the book now, so I'm going to ask you questions just as a fan of you and your work. Okay. So when the book starts, you're living with Susan, your mum.
Yeah.
You're living with Laura,
Yeah.
your older sister, Jack, your older brother, and Jacob, your younger brother.
Yeah.
Right? And so before everything went really sour, you talk about that holiday in Cornwall that you all went to, which is like one of the last really nice memories that you talk about in the book. What was your life before everything went really sour? And when I mean sour, I mean like the fight where Laura and Jack end up moving out and leaving. Before that, how would you describe your home life and your relationship with your mother?
My mum was amazing. I couldn't really remember a lot of my childhood, like from the early stages. But obviously, those are sort of my first memories. My mum was a great mum when she wasn't drinking, and she was amazing. Yeah. However, when she started drinking, that sort of turned.
So you do a really beautiful job of writing your mother as one of the most complicated characters I've read in a book recently, because you can write her to be this horrifying, really scary, violent sort of villain, monster in the book. However, then you always manage to bring out that human aspect of her. So she's sober and suddenly you want her affection. Suddenly she's a mum. Suddenly your sister gets pregnant and she's in granny mode and she's being this ordinary sort of mum and granny figure. As now you are a parent, how do you think about that, those two sides of her, those two warring sides of her personality? I mean, it must be still confusing, I bet, is it?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I had my own son, like I've been growing up my whole life, I couldn't understand it. When I was a child, all I wanted was my mum. So when I had my child, I looked at my son and I couldn't understand why someone would hurt something so innocent.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think she was very ill.
Is that what because that was how I thought of her as well, is someone who maybe has some kind of undiagnosed mental illness or some issue with her personality that is reflected when she drinks. I mean, is that what we assume is the case?
I know my mum went through a lot when she was a child. She was pushed into child homes. She was abused herself, and she got adopted late after that. And I feel like she drank because she never got help from herself. I think that affected her quite bad. And I think she was a very good person, but when she drank, that changed.
Yeah, and honestly, you've done such a lovely job of bringing that side out of her, because it makes her more frustrating as a character, because you're going, oh, why has she turned like that? And I've known people like that in my own life, where you see that thing in her eyes and you go, oh no, they're drunk now, it's going to be a terrible experience, a terrible night. So this, if you don't mind, we'll talk a little bit about your biological father as well. So you met him when you were young, or at this point he wasn't on the scene when you were 9 or 10, he was living away, is that right?
Yeah.
Living in Malta, is that right? Yeah. And he had very limited contact with him, other than what, he would send you letters, maybe? Is that what it was?
He used to send me birthday cards and money.
Yeah, and how did that affect you at that time? Like, how did you think about that when you were a kid? Did you mind? Were you thinking a lot about it? Did you want contact with him? Or
I think when you're a child and you don't have your family around, like, or your dad or your mum, I think you think of these people as superheroes, like they're in some sort of castle, or they're the king or queen, or something amazing. And then obviously they send you this card, or a little, like, quite a bit of money, or a little bit of money, and it sort of like doesn't make you understand if they're sort of these superheroes. Why can't they see you?
Yeah,
and that hurts.
Yeah, of course it does. And then, so you go to Cornwall and you have this holiday with your family. You almost get swept out to sea, and it's a really, you write that really well, and it's a really lovely image of you and your family unit. And then, is it maybe the next day or soon after, everything falls apart in the immediate family unit. There's your mum has a drink, and then she gets into a fight with your sister Laura and your brother Jack, and then both of them end up moving out. So what was your memories of that night, that key moment?
I think obviously because it was close to Christmas, I think it was Boxing Day.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I think obviously being a child, just so excited. It's Christmas, you got presents and stuff like that. You're so excited, but with an alcoholic, you always watch how many drinks she's drinking. Yeah. Like when one turns into one, or one turns into five, and you're constantly watching that. But that day, I chose not to. I knew it was going to end bad. I had a feeling. We obviously stopped when she puked all over in the car, and that was horrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I think when we got, I think we knew as soon as we got to the door. She did this thing where she would suddenly pass out, and then like the next minute she'd be up and like going mental, and that sort of was hard, because you knew that when she passed out, she would pop up and start going crazy. And that was hard. I think that night was very hard for me, because obviously I loved my brother and sister, and for them to just go out of our life was quite difficult. Yeah,
and I tried to see things from their point of view as well, because they sort of left that night, and part of you says, I don't blame them. I don't blame them for wanting to get away from that. They're both sort of becoming adults and want to do their own thing. But then suddenly you go, oh no, but then Jess is now left alone with her little brother, Jacob. And so what you write in the book is that suddenly you were now the target, because your older siblings weren't there.
On that night, I looked, and my sister came to the window, and I started laughing, because it sort of felt like you know when you're younger you play like shops and stuff like that. She looked at me and she was in tears, and she had these obviously her tears were running down and her eyes were a mess, and you could just see how sad, this pure sadness in her eyes, and I don't think I've ever seen her that distressed and worried and upset, and that broke me a lot.
I'm not surprised.
Obviously I loved my sister so much.
Yeah, of course. And so then they leave, and it's you, your little brother, and your mum. And then I hope you don't mind me telling us the story a little bit like this, and then asking you for your opinion, because I've been thinking about your book for like 2 days straight, so I've got the story in my head like sort of perfectly, and I want to and I know that it can be sort of nerve-wracking talking to a stranger about this sort of thing, so but feel free to take over the narrative whenever you want to. But so the older brother and the older sister move out, and then suddenly you're alone with Jacob and your mum, and then soon she starts to go out to nightclubs, and she starts to go on dates and that sort of thing, and go out to enjoy the nightlife, and you're left alone with your little brother in the house. And it's at this point in the story where things get so uncomfortable as a reader. I mean, you write it beautifully, it's a great book, but this is the reality of what happens to you now and for the next however many years of your life is so shocking that I've never read anything like it, and I was uncomfortable. I was trying to explain to my girlfriend how I felt whilst reading it. It's like a roller coaster. And if you don't mind, we're going to talk now about Sean. He's come into your life, and those early initial experiences. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So your mum's been going out, and she meets this guy in the book called Sean, and she introduces him to you and your little brother, I think. What were your initial impressions of him that first day, that first time you met him?
He was trying too hard, and I didn't like him. I had, my gut was telling me no. And that's what I felt. Yeah,
and so he comes to live with you and your mum, doesn't he, for a little while? He's always around a lot. He's around the house a lot. Yeah,
it's sort of a bit both, back and forwards to his, back and forwards to mine.
Right.
There was quite a long time where she stayed at his a lot, and I was just there to defend me and my little brother. That was the most time we actually felt okay, because it was just me and him, and obviously it was quite hard trying to look after him and myself, but there was no arguments, there was no big explosions, it was just me and him.
And then things start to get difficult here, because you notice, as a 9 or 10-year-old girl, you notice that Sean is watching you, right? And his attention is becoming uncomfortable, and then it manifests initially in it's in the attic, isn't he, where he tries to kiss you for the first time. So what? I mean, I don't want to make you turf up these emotions and these memories if you don't want to talk about these in depth. But what are you? So he's kissed you in the attic. How do you process that as a kid, and what were you thinking? Because what I found was really interesting was that you were like, oh, is this what he wants us to see him as dad? Is this how all dads treat their daughters and stuff?
I think when it happened, my initial thought was run and tell my mum. So I ran downstairs, I pushed past my little brother, and I skidded at a stop, and she was like, what do you want? And it was sort of like, obviously I had this massive thing of what I was going to say to her, but then he was standing at the doorway, and I felt like I didn't know myself what had happened. Obviously so I went in the shower. My immediate thing was to go to the shower, and that's what calmed me down. Obviously I went to school and tried to speak to her about my friends, and they said that's what dads do, and initially my thought was, well, that's normal, maybe I just overreacted. Obviously you see children and dads and mums kissing all the time. Why was it different to my mum kissing me? So I got a bad feeling from it, but I didn't know how to act on that.
And then as the story goes on, this attention from him gets increasingly worse, and there's a awful moment where I think you start to feel dizzy. Were you home alone or something? You start to feel dizzy, and then it transpires that you've been drugged, right? And then that was the first time that he abused you in full. Was that right? So the day after that, like the first proper sexual abuse from Sean, how did you cope with that as a kid? How did you talk to yourself about it, or what does it mean to you?
I think from me having a cigarette and looking out, obviously I knew where I was, to waking up to being in your bedroom naked and having obviously stuff on you that wouldn't normally be there.
Yeah.
It was quite confusing because you when things happen and you know that something happened, it makes you angry because you don't know exactly, but you do.
Yeah, it's because you don't have the vocabulary or life experience as a kid to discuss it or frame it in a way that you can discuss it with people.
I think when you've been drugged, I think your body feels so different. I couldn't move. You know, I fell on my beanbag, and I think you just as a child you don't really know.
That's right. We've got so Jess has brought her lovely family, lovely partner, a lovely son around. So if you hear some noises and banging in the background, that's just them playing.
I do apologise.
Ah, don't worry.
I think, like, obviously you don't understand it when you're a child.
Yeah.
Obviously when you grow up a little bit you do, but it's quite hard when you're little.
Yeah. So and now the story progresses and he becomes increasingly bold, almost as if, I mean, later on it seems almost as if like the getting caught was part of the thrill for him, right? So he gets more and more bold. He visits you in your room, and then this whole time your mum, who knows about his past, is that right? Because she's aware of what he used to, of his convictions.
The police did visit us.
That's right. Yeah. And that it was even described to at some point what a paedophile is and what his previous charges had been, having all his pictures of kids on his computer and that sort of thing. But it wasn't a case of, well, he's supervised, he's with your mum, so he's allowed to be around the kids. So, which is a huge injustice. I'm not sure what's happened there. That legal system is a nightmare. So your mum, I thought this was a really interesting part of the story. Your mum starts to get jealous of the attention that he's given you.
Yeah.
So instead of her thinking, okay, something is happening here, I need to protect my daughter, she's thinking, she's trying to steal my man. And you were a kid still at this point. Yeah. So that affected your relationship with her. And so at this point, what was your relationship with her like? It was getting strained and she was drinking more perhaps? Or?
Yeah, definitely. You'd find alcohol bottles in the weirdest places possible, like in the bathroom laundry basket underneath all the clothes. And obviously because I cleaned and cooked and washed the clothes, obviously I'd be finding these bottles. It was horrible because I didn't understand when she was saying I was stealing her boyfriend. To me, he was my dad. Yeah. And I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, and that's the complicated thing that is a theme over the conversation and over the book, is your warring emotions with Sean, and it's exactly the same with your mother. So there's the one side of the coin where they are affectionate and funny and interesting, and they're the person that you needed them to be, and then there's this awful dark other side of them. I wonder, just off topic, has that affected your, I mean, how old are you now?
I'm 24.
So does that affect your relationships with other people that you meet? I mean, do you think, are you always waiting for the dark side of that person to reveal themselves, or how does this affect your relationships now?
I think that affected me the most because obviously you try, obviously when people do bad things you crave the good. With my mum drinking, her attitude when she was drunk obviously was the worst thing possible, but when she was good and she was happy, she was the kindest person I knew. And in a weird way I looked up to her because she was a person who volunteered at a charity shop. She would work normally, she would stop and help anyone out. She wasn't a sort of person who you'd think was like that.
And does that confusing aspect of her personality, when you meet someone in the street or you make a new friend, do you always think, okay, but what's wrong with you? You seem nice, but what's the dark side?
I think my whole life there's always one step forward and two steps back, and obviously I do worry, and I do take obviously a step back when I meet people, but then obviously when I get to know people I do cling on to them a little bit more than I would, because I do get afraid of losing those good people. Even unfortunately, you don't always know what people are like until you get to know them.
Sure. Yeah, and that's because I found. I mean, the reason I asked that is because I read your book, and then for the last 2 days since I've read your book, I've been suspicious of everybody. Yeah, it's had an impact on me even. So that was good. That's all I want to know about that, because I thought that was interesting. I want to know what the and I'm sure people will be interested in what are the side effects of all of this breaches of your trust as a kid, like what the effects have been sort of since then.
I think with men, you get suspicious at first with all men.
Yeah.
But as growing up, I've realised that actually not all people are mean and horrible. You know, there are lovely people.
But that in itself...
And also, it's not just men who abuse, it's also women.
That's right. And that in itself is a testament to your strength and determination to spin some good out of everything bad that's happened to you. Because if you were bitter and angry and you hated everyone and you shut yourself off from the world, that would be a almost justifiable response to the terrible things that have happened to you. Instead, you've flourished, you've written a book, you've got a lovely family, and you've made positive things happen for yourself. But if you hadn't had that strength, people would understand because of what's happened to you. You see what I mean? So you've used it almost as a armor, as a weapon, these terrible things, and become a good person out of it, which is unbelievable.
Thank you.
Hey, no worries. So the stuff with Sean goes on for a long time, and eventually you and the family move in with him.
Yeah.
And so what's the background there? So Sean doesn't work, but somehow is well off, right? He's got a lot of money coming in. So what is that? Why does he have so much money? Is it his family? Is that right? We won't go into details, obviously, about the family, but you can... Yeah.
I think... obviously he doesn't work, but his mum was very well off, and she used to come round and supply him quite a lot of money each week. Right,
which enabled him to sort of do whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah. And live the lifestyle he sort of wanted to do.
Yeah, that's right. So now you go to school, and everything at home there's no respite for you at home. It's a difficult place for you to be. And then you go to school and things start to get worse there for you. Yeah. You know, there's some fucking asshole. I can't remember his fucking name in the book, but there's some asshole who's giving you a hard time, throwing gum in your hair, and so you end up spending most of your time in the toilet, sort of hiding away. What was that time like for you in school? I mean, with no island away from all this darkness and this sadness and these terrible things. I mean, how were you feeling at this time?
I think school was one of the worst times of my life. Obviously, being so scared to just walk in a classroom, or even just obviously walking into school full stop, was the worst feeling ever. Yeah. The only place that I felt safe was the toilets, and for me it was closing the door and shutting off from the world. Obviously there was quite a lot of bullies, and obviously there's a saying that sticks and stones don't break your bones, but words can't hurt you. Yeah. But the words are actually the worst, because you can heal from broken bones and you can't from words.
Yeah.
And later on in obviously in the book, I do actually find some friends, which they were very good friends, but it was really a hard time when I was actually being bullied.
Yeah, of course it was.
Obviously being bullied at home and being abused at home, it was very hard to. I didn't really want to be there. I just didn't want to be in the world.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is the part of the story where I'd like, if you can, for you to tell it not in the way you did in the book, but in whatever way you're comfortable with. But Sean says something about going on a little holiday. So you go away to London, right, to meet his friend Steve.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us, because this is the start of where it's not an isolated thing anymore. It's not just Sean, doing these awful things to you. He starts to incorporate other people into it, right? Yeah. And so, if you wouldn't mind, could you please tell us a little bit about that trip? But also, and I've said this a few times, and I'll make sure I say it at the beginning of the episode when I record it, but you don't have to discuss anything you don't want to. I mean, if this is uncomfortable, we can stop them. Yeah, but if you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, that's fine. We obviously, when you think you're going on holiday, you think, slides, swimming, all the fun things. But we turned up in this council estate. It was a mess. We sort of got out, and obviously it wasn't really what we imagined a holiday would be. Because you don't, do you?
What, council estate? No, it was a terrible holiday.
So obviously they came out and they were outside and we were being greeted, and he was. I think you'd have to read the book for me to obviously to know what he was like.
Yeah, I mean, and I would recommend people buying the book for this section because it is so startling and it was so difficult to read. So you don't have to tell the whole thing, but just an overview of what the situation was. Because I'm interested in the other character in this, which is Louise.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it just gives a little bit about that sort of dynamic.
He came across very aggressive, and it wasn't the people my mum or him would hang out, like be friends with. It was a bit of really weird settings. The first night everything was fine. Everything's, we were just playing with the kids and everything was fine. The second we woke up, obviously, and her mum and my mum decided to go for a mum's spa, which I begged and begged and begged for my mum to take me, but she wouldn't. I didn't really like where we were staying. I was a bit nervous, and I just wanted to be in my home. Obviously they left and things drastically changed, and we were pulled to go downstairs. And it got quite. Everything happened very, very quickly. When there was a comment that Steve said, and it always stuck with me, how he was talking about bareback riding, and I asked Louise what that was. Being a child and into horses, I thought they were talking about horses. Yeah. But Louise looked at me like, what are you going on about? Which that stuck with me for quite a while, because I didn't quite understand it. I didn't realise what was about to happen, and it all happened very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So you and Louise, who is in the book when we're reading about her, she's Steve's daughter, and then so you and Louise are both abused by Sean and Steve, and so I mean that we won't go into that any more, but I would encourage people to read that part of the book because it's so difficult. And then it was actually at this point in the book where I thought, fucking hell, things can't get any worse, right? Your life couldn't get any more terrible with these people around you. And then somehow it does. And every time I think that in the book, I remember reading it next to my partner in bed, and I have to keep putting it down and going, oh, fucking hell, it's getting worse. This is just happening, And so maybe we'll full stop that there. So the trip was... I think
the hardest thing was for me was writing that chapter, because there were so many moments that was even just to try and get it right, and the emotion of it. There was a bit about where obviously they were abusing Louise, and she was gripping into my knees, my legs, and I could feel the pain inside me. From where she was gripping her hands, and I could see the pain in her eyes. And I think it was the worst pain impossible you could think of, because for someone so young and innocent to hurt and abuse a child it's really bad.
So you get back from this awful experience with Sean's friend Steve and his daughter Louise, and then soon after you start to notice, you come downstairs for a cigarette, and you notice on his computer...
There's no stairs.
No stairs?
No, it's a bungalow.
Oh, is it? Oh, nice. Yeah. So you're floating through this bungalow, and you notice that there is the computer's on, and that is it's filming your bedroom, I think. Is that right? And you see that your brother's bedroom's being filmed, and so what happened there? Why was he filming everybody?
Me and my little brother, we actually knew something was going on. There was little things that he would say that didn't quite sit right. There was one instance with Coke, bottles of Coke. We weren't allowed to drink his Coke. We were only allowed lemonade or water or milk or something light. But obviously, being a child, we really wanted something we couldn't have.
Oh yeah.
So we decided in the middle of the night we'd sneak into the fridge and have like a sip, or well, maybe half the bottle or something. But he noticed, and then we tried one night, and we thought we'd just have a small little sip. And he came the next morning and asked us why we drank his Coke. And we didn't quite understand how he would know from a sip. Or we checked the bottle to see if he'd like labelled it or something like that. Yeah. But we couldn't quite understand it. And then one night I was creeping to go and have a cigarette, and I went in and got a lighter from his computer desk, and his computer screen lit up, and I could see all these like squares, and it had the whole house and my bedroom, my little brother's bedroom, their bedroom, the kitchen, and obviously seeing that, you just completely like thrown back because you just don't understand it. Like, you don't see these cameras. And
so why was he doing that? It was to sell the footage, I guess. Was it online, or or other people were watching it like live, or what was the situation there?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what he was doing with it. Whether he was getting a thrill out of it, I don't know. Yeah. But that night it was horrible because I didn't really know what to do. I woke up, and normally I would just get undressed and get ready for school or get into my normal clothes, and I felt like I couldn't. And obviously there was a little bit in my bedroom. It was kind of obviously not seeing, so I would sort of squeeze and try and I think quickly he figured that I knew. I don't know if he figured out that night because I panicked. The computer light obviously was shining when he came out, and I did panic. Yeah. Because normally when you touch the computer, it kind of goes off, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there was an awful. One of the worst parts of the book to read was the 12 Monkeys part of it. So can you just explain what that is about, like this part of the book?
Each and every one of them used to call me Daddy's little princess. And I think that's now, obviously now I realise that that's what I was called, and I think that's what he used to sound my name.
Yeah.
And obviously it got a bit strange because when one person calls you one thing, and then they start calling you the same, you don't understand, because obviously that wasn't my name. The 12 Monkeys was written as a poem, because unfortunately, obviously, when you keep writing about bad things, eventually there's only so much you can read. So I decided to try and do it in a way where people could read it but understand what was going on, because obviously people do need to understand that that's what actually happens in the world.
Yeah, so essentially it was a case of the Daddy's Little Princess thing was he had been essentially selling you
on the black market.
Yeah, so you'd go to a hotel, and then they'd leave you, and then a stranger would turn up, and that's because he had sold you on the internet to these fucking assholes. And
I couldn't understand it because he comes from a lot of money. I couldn't understand what he was selling me for. I don't know whether it was money, drugs, girls. I don't know. But obviously I never worked that one out.
There comes a time when all of this awful stuff happens, the 12 monkey thing, and it's terrible. But there comes a time when you, your mum and your brother, leave Sean's house.
Yeah.
Right? To live with a friend, or one of your mum's friends, or an old neighbour or something, wasn't it? And then, and so you end up going back to Sean's, and you discover something there which makes it all the more alarming. Right, so can you tell me about what it is you found when you went back to Sean's house?
I opened the cupboard to get a glass, and there was a watch, a little girl's watch, sitting in the shot glass when I opened it. And I said to him, "Who's this? Whose watch is this?" And he said, "Oh, I thought that was yours." And I knew then something wasn't right.
Right.
Obviously, I know that wasn't mine. So it must have been another girl's.
First of all, thank you for coming here and talking to me about this. I know it's not good. I mean, you've done a really good job of taking control of all these awful things that happen to you. I mean, when people buy your book, they'll see that it seems endless. It seems like there's always something horrendous just about to happen to you, and it makes you anxious reading it. But it's such a compelling read that you power through and think, "Oh God, this poor girl." But you haven't. You have turned it now into a strength. Now you can sell it as a book. You can start to help people. So why did you start writing it in the first place? Is it lockdown boredom, or what happened there?
Me and my partner actually took a holiday to Turkey. That was a bit manic actually, because we got stuck in the Thomas Cook thing.
Oh no!
Yeah, so that was a bit hectic. So we got to our hotel and we were told we can't actually get in our hotel room 2 o'clock the next day.
Oh.
So we were sitting talking at the beach, and we were talking about everything I've been through. My partner actually jokingly said, you could write a book about what you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And I came home from that holiday and decided I was going to write about what I had been through to make sense of it for me. I didn't actually think I was going to write a book, but then it started getting bigger and bigger, and it started forming into a book.
Yeah, that's great, because and you've got such a knack for it. I mean, you've done such a great job telling the story. How have you been surprised by the reception? Because everywhere I go, there's reviews about it, people are raving about it, and it's all over online at the moment. So how do you feel about that? Are you anxious because all these terrible things that have happened to you is out there, or do you feel stronger as a result because it's like, oh, here I am, I'm finally living my truth?
I was worried about it at first, because what people have got to understand is even though it's a book and it's a story to them, it's my life. And when it was first going out, I was wondering, actually, obviously everyone has their own opinions, and that opinions is about my life. And I was terrified. There was a bit about the book where I was hiding in toilets, and to me that was pathetic, and it was the bad bits about my life and that I'm not proud of, and it does make me quite ashamed. And for people to actually read the darkest depths of my life, it is a little bit terrifying. But I hope that obviously people who have been through all these horrible situations, that they can read it, and hopefully it will help them as well.
Yeah, and everything's slightly more personal, and don't feel like you have to answer this. It's just I'm just curious. So you've got your very handsome, very lovely partner sat behind us, and Jim, and you. What was it like when you first knew that you had to, love someone? And do you find that those intimate relationships are affected now? Like were you able to love openly, or because you were looking for someone to love, or were you scared? Was it a spirit? Did it take you a while to adjust to it?
I think there was quite a few relationships before Jim, and I didn't. To tell you the truth, I didn't feel nothing in emotional wise, in a lot of ways. In the bedroom wise, can I say that?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
I didn't feel anything. I didn't understand why people did have sex, because to me it didn't mean anything. It wasn't the way you read about it in like the movies or the books. It's nothing. It wasn't like that to me. And I think obviously there was one relationship that I tried to make it work, and again, nothing. It was almost like I was broken.
Yeah.
And when I met Jim, that changed, and all the emotions, obviously, loving someone, my wall came down, and I couldn't be without him.
Yeah, well, that's okay, because there's a few marks of and a few tests of your strength as a woman and as a human being, and that's one of them, right? Because you can, if it was the other way around, if you could never find the strength to love again, it would be one of those things where people go, oh, I get it. If you could never have sex again, people could think, well, of course not. Of course you couldn't. We completely understand. So the fact every single time there's a barrier or a wall or something in front of you that could define you as Jess, who is this, Jess, who this happened to, you leap over those things and you smash those walls down by being a good person, by being a good mum, by being a good partner, by achieving things, despite the fact that the world has only ever given you awful feedback when you're from a young age. And that's the thing I admire most about you, and that's why I want to talk to you today about that, because that's great. And your mum, to lovely Jake. So how have you found being a mum? Have you, how was that, because of your relationship with your own mother? I mean, how's that impacted you as a mum?
My birth wasn't actually, it was actually quite dramatic. I actually had a C-section. We almost died. So it was quite hard. Obviously I was in a lot of pain for quite a few days, and I couldn't actually hold him and do things for him. So I didn't really have that bond mums do. Yeah. And I found that very difficult. There was one time I actually, we were in hospital for about 2 weeks, and I walked out one night and I couldn't do it. I texted my partner because he went home to get some sleep, and I said, I'm done. I can't do this. And he was there in 2 minutes. Yeah. And he was there by my side, and I obviously then I did start bonding with him, and obviously I looked at him, especially writing this book, and I couldn't understand how some things that you would die for, you'd do anything for, you could let someone hurt them, or even yourself. How could you hurt? Like, obviously kids, they test your patience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Obviously you'd never think of beating them or giving them to someone to do awful things to. Yeah. And I've said to a lot of people, if anyone hurt my boy, I wouldn't let that down. Yeah,
of course. And then, so good. I mean, that's another one. That's another thing. That's another awful thing happened to you. You learn from it. Now you're using it for the better. And I think I said to you earlier, I read your book as a father, and some of the most harrowing things were the, oh my God, I don't understand how I would never let anything like this happen to my son. You're protective, and when you're talking about the, not feeling the bond with him for the first little while when he was born, I mean, that's perfectly normal. Yeah. Because as the father, I felt a similar way the first few weeks, because he was Misha, my partner, was breastfeeding, so he was always with her, and he was just screaming and keeping me awake all the time. So I struggled to get that initial bond. But once it kicks in, it's a permanent, raw, powerful aspect of you as a human being.
I think when they're crying, and then they obviously you're stressed and everything like that, I think they do something small, and that makes you fall in love with them even more.
Yeah, I remember oftentimes I've looked at my son and I thought, because he's cried and woke me up at 3 a.m, and I've gone in his room and he's absolutely fine and he's smiling up at me. I thought, oh, you bastard, why are you doing that? Because he just knows he just wants to be around me. And I think that's the once you get used to it, it's fine. And being a parent is amazing, and you're doing a really great job at it. So
thank you.
So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the charity and all the ass you're kicking.
Thank you.
So Jess, all of these things that have happened to you, you've taken them, and now you're trying to help other people in a similar situation, other kids that might have been experiencing what you experienced, right? So you are making changes and doing some really, really wonderful things I'd love to talk about for a minute. So can we talk about the charity?
Yeah.
So what's the hope there, and how are you getting on with setting it up?
The charity came about really because obviously I was getting a lot of messages with people who are in abuse or has been in abuse, and it's broken my heart, as you can imagine, because obviously I can relate to a lot of things that they're saying, and I can't do anything. I feel powerless. I can't do anything, and I feel I had a really big think about it and what I want to do, and I thought about opening this charity, something that will actually make a difference and help children that would have probably helped me in my situation.
Yeah, that's great. And is that a complicated process, setting it up? I mean, I don't know the first thing about doing something like that. Is that
it's very complicated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of paperwork and things that need to be in place, which we are currently doing at the moment.
So what's your goal for the charity, like the long-term ambition?
We are currently looking at opening one centre at the moment and hopefully expanding it all around the UK. In these centres there will be on-site therapy, counselling, swimming and animals. Studies show that humans actually feel more comfortable actually talking to animals because they don't feel judged or...
Sure. That makes sense. And because you talk at times about in the book about a beautiful relationship with a horse that you had,
Yeah.
and I thought that was wonderful. And I think that's if you can implement that in your charity, then that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think that will be a very big thing with the charity because obviously we have so many ideas at the moment with animals because I think it's a very good therapy way to go. Obviously, we can have so much more with the charity. Obviously, these the people who are young children are coming out of these situations, and foster carers are not actually trained. They are trained in looking after them, but not actually in the therapy way.
Right.
So instead of going into care, they would come to us, and they would get the help, the counselling and the therapy they need to then go into foster care and cope with their situation a little bit better and knowing that there is a future for them.
Yeah.
And obviously another thing is cases like courts. Obviously a lot of people are afraid to talk out and speak up because they feel like they're not safe, or else they would come to us, and these addresses are unknown, so they will be protected, and they can feel like they can have a voice.
Yeah.
My charity will be called Your Voice UK, and we are at the moment in stages of doing the paperwork, which is hopefully soon finishing up and running in the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
We've got quite a few investors at the moment, which is pushing it along, which hopefully but that can be all sorted hopefully soon, and we're going to start some GoFundMe pages and events, which hopefully people can get involved with.
Yeah. Hey, wow, that's great. maybe you're you are the perfect person to lead a movement like this to change the way that the people, society, the government sees this awful thing that's happening and people aren't really talking about. So amazing. That's amazing work.
Yeah, thank you.
And speaking of, I mean, should we talk about the panel meeting you've got?
Yes.
You've got what you described as a panel meeting coming up. Can you tell us more about what that is, what that means?
The panel is actually called The Conversation We Need, which is taking place on the 25th of November at University Brighton.
Okay.
It's got people, Peter Kyle, who's one of the MPs, Greg Clark, who's one of the MPs, Miles Oakwell, who's from Sussex Place, myself, Maisie Mountain, who's a student panelist, Natasha Saunders, who's a refugee champion, and Julie Morgan. They're going to be the main panellists on the panel. Mm-hmm. This panel is to talk about obviously the things that actually need to be make a change in the system, because the system we have is not right. There's so many topics that it's going to be coming across regarding police training, social services, schools, a lot of things, and hopefully we can make a few changes. I will also be doing a book signing on the day, so if anyone wants to come and say hi, they're free.
Go and say hi. Yeah. And where is that again? So it's in Brighton, did you say?
Brighton, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, I mean, whilst you're here, is there anything else you want to make sure that people listening know about either the charity or the panel meeting, or what can people do now to help you or support you?
Well, like and share is the most important thing, and hopefully spread awareness. Hopefully when the charity is up in the next couple of weeks, looking at getting people involved as much as we can, and going to need all the help we can get, really.
Yeah, let's rally.
I'd also like to just give a shout out, if that's possible,
Please.
to my agent and my publisher for being by my side. And my agent has been great, been amazing, really. You know, he's been by my side, and even when I've been in pain, he's sat there, and you know.
Yeah. And who is your agent? What company is it?
My publisher is Fortis Publishing,
Mm-hmm.
and my agent is Ken Scott. He's a ghostwriter and an agent.
Okay.
So I'd highly recommend it if you're looking
Good
to...
job, guys. Yeah, good job. So, I mean, if you're happy, we can sort of leave it there. So from me at Calis Media, my company's just started. This is sort of the humble beginnings. I really appreciate you coming all the way down here to give your story to me and to us as a company, and I promise to handle it with all the love and attention it deserves, and hopefully people can hear, people are listening and they want to help you now and support you. If you find The Girl in the Pink Shoes, which is the name of the book, and the Facebook pages and stuff, go there, like and share and get involved, and let's actually make a difference, and let's help Jess to fight this battle. So from me, Steve Calis, this has been the Steve Calis Show. Jess, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all so much for listening.